Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to be creating a ship class and then creating an instance of that class in our main test game so that the game will behave the way it already has. So in the end you're not actually going to see any difference in the game. I launched the game and everything should happen exactly as it's happening right now. So let's go ahead and get started. Right click, first of all locate your core and your source and your test game. Right click it. Click on New, and click on Java Class. I'm going to call my Java class Ship. And that was just a message about Git, because we're using Git, or at least I'm using Git, to keep track of the changes I'm making in the program. Alright, so first thing we want in our ship is some of the instance variables. So the things that describe what the ship is, or things related to the ship. So let's go back to the test game. Let's find out everything related to the ship. Well, we have sprite batch. Okay, that doesn't really fit. Texture image. Oh, image was what we used to draw the ship. So our ship needs to have its own image. Okay, so let's go over to ship. And let's go ahead and declare a variable. We're going to make it a private variable so it can't be accessed outside of the ship. So private texture, and I'm going to give it a better name than img this time. I'm going to call it a ship image. Okay, now it's saying right here that I need to import, saying, oh, okay, wait, what in the world's this? If I hover it over it and click on it, I can just hit Alt and then Enter, and I can import that class. So it's going to import the texture class for me since I refer to the texture class inside of the ship. Alright, so I have a texture. Okay, what else is related to the ship? Well, let's go back to the test game. Let's see what happens. So we got the ship, we've got its texture, we've got the texture for the asteroid, so that's not related. So we're going to go ahead and take off this texture for right now. We don't need that. We put that inside of our ship. Ship hitbox. Okay, so we're definitely going to need a ship hitbox. Why don't we go ahead and go over to ship. Let's do private texture. Oh, it's a rectangle. And it's the bad logic.gdx.math rectangle. And we're going to do its hitbox. So why don't we call that ship hitbox? So we've got our ship hitbox, we've got our ship image. Let's go back down. We have X and Y. So X and Y is also related to the ship, and the X and the Y coordinates are the position of the ship. So our ship has a hitbox, it has its image, and it has its position. So we need to do private float X and Y. Let's see what else we have going on with the ship. So we're going to scroll on down. And you know what? I'm going to leave that image in for right now because in a little bit we're just going to replace this with the actual ship instance image. Alright, so what else we got going on with the ship? Well, when we draw the image of our ship, we've got the path, so we need to tell it maybe where the path is, maybe not. We also need to tell it the width and the height of the ship. Okay. Well, you have a couple choices right here. When you're declaring the width and the height, you could hard code that in as 6464, but imagine we wanted to, I don't know, upgrade our ship, and all of a sudden our ship is a new instance of the ship and it uses a different image, and it's bigger or maybe smaller. You would want your width and height to be a little bit more abstract. So you want to be able to change the width and the height of the ship depending on its image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, create two new variables. I'm going to say ship width and ship height. And so this variable, X and Y, describe the lower left-hand corner of the ship image. The ship width and ship height describe the width and the height of the box that the ship was drawn in. Not the hitbox necessarily, just the box the ship was drawn in, its image box. Okay, anything else? Well, you know, when we blow up the ship, we want the ship to probably have a different image than what we have before. And if we look at our render method right here, the only thing that happens when it overlaps the asteroid hitbox is it prints out true or false, and that's not very exciting. We probably want the image of the ship to change into a blown up ship when it hits the asteroid. And we can code that in later. I'm going to go ahead and reserve that variable right now. So under the texture, I believe I'm going to want to put a ship blown up image as well. So private texture ship blown up image. So that's the image the ship's going to display when it's been blown up. Alright, so I think I've got everything I want to have for the ship. Those are the things that the ship is. Maybe that describes the ship. So adjectives, remember those are your instance variables for your class. Now we need to kind of create a constructor for our ship and also create constructors for the textures and the setters and getters, you know, for the textures and the rectangles. So when we take a look at the ship, we also need a constructor for the ship. So let's do public ship, and this allows us to construct a ship. So we need to have a string that represents the ship image location. So I'm making up these variables. You can call it whatever you want. A string for the blown up image location. A float for the lower left hand corner of the image, a float for the Y, a float for the ship width, and a float for the ship height. Now you may be wondering, okay, why did we need a string for the ship image location? Remember when we came over here and we render, actually above render, the path, we needed the path for the location of the ship image right here. So when we're creating the texture for the ship, we need to be able to refer to its location of its image. So under the ship, when we create a ship, we want to be able to refer to the image of the ship location and also the image of the blown up ship, or the location of the blown up ship. So we've got a constructor. Now we need to be able to set all those variables. So we're going to refer to the instance of the ship, this, and we want this ship image. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this ship image right here, the texture, equal to a new texture, and the texture is going to be the ship image location. Okay, this dot blown up image is going to be equal to a new texture, and it's going to be the blown up image location. So all I've done right here is we go back to original game, image, we've declared that image is an image and it's equal to a new texture, and this is where we found it. So under the ship now, I'm just doing the exact same thing. This is the constructor for the ship, and we say, okay, we're going to refer to this instance and we're going to go to the ship image. So this ship image is equal to a new texture, and it's going to be where? It's going to be at the ship image location. So where we can find the ship image inside the file. Same way with the blown up ship image. Alright, this dot x equals x, this dot y equals y, this dot ship width equals ship width, and this dot ship height equals ship height. Okay, oh, and one last thing we also need, this dot ship hitbox is going to be equal to a new rectangle with the coordinates x, y, so that represents the lower left-hand corner of the rectangle for the ship hitbox, and the ship width and the ship height. Because remember, we're going to put a rectangle around the image of the ship. And how big is that image? Well, it's the ship width and ship height. That's how big it is. Alright, so that's the constructor for our ship object. Now what we're going to need to do is create some new methods. We need a method for moving the ship. And so if we look back at the test game, all of the logic for moving the ship is down here in the render method. And it tells us where the ship's going to be based on which key has been pressed. So what we need to do is we need to kind of take this from the ship, our testgame.java, and we need to move it over to our ship class. So we're going to create a brand new method. I'm going to call it public void, and because that means we're not returning any values, move ship. And this is where I'm going to put all the logic. So I'm going to cut this out of here. And I'm going to put that in our ship class. So anytime the move ship method is called, it's going to check to see which key is pressed, and it's going to change the x and the y value of the ship. Alright, but which x and y value? You could probably get away with just using x and y, but to be a little bit more explicit, let's call this dot x. That says, hey, we're referring to this instance of the ship, its x value, and we're setting it equal to x plus 5. And we'll just do that for all of the x and the y values. Okay, so now we have a way to move the ship. But you might think, okay, when you move the ship, if we go back to our test game right here, every time the ship moves, the ship hitbox also moves. So we probably should cut that out and move that in the move ship image as well, because the ship hitbox moves with the ship. So ship hitbox, for some reason, is giving me an issue there. And that's because it's a capital S, should be lowercase s. And we're setting the position of the ship hitbox to x, y. Alright, so far we should have the ability to move the ship, and we have the ability to construct the ship right here. The only thing we have to do left is to check to see if the ship is colliding with something. So let's come down and let's create one new method. So right here, this is what we print out if they are colliding. In other words, the ship hitbox overlaps the asteroid hitbox. But the problem is this only works for one specific asteroid. And truthfully, we're going to need to change that later on. We're going to kind of hard code that in for right now. And it's something we're going to affect later, because we hopefully don't have just one asteroid on the screen that we're checking to see if our ship intersects. So what we're going to do is we're going to go, I'm going to say public void check collision. So I'm going to check for collisions. That's what I'm going to name this new method. And the new method is going to take in two rectangles. It's going to take in one rectangle called the ship hitbox. It's going to take in another rectangle, and I'm just going to call it rectangle 1. So our check collision is going to take the ship hitbox and any other rectangle and find out whether or not they're overlapping. So if ship hitbox dot overlaps rect1, so if the ship box is overlapping the rectangle that we're given, what's it going to do? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go ship image equals ship blown up image. So what that means is we're changing the image of the ship to its blown up image. And if you remember ship image and ship blown up image, as we come back all the way to the top, they're textures. And so what we're doing is well, that's something we probably need to work on a different video. Those are values by reference. We're just changing the way that the variable refers. So basically we're just saying that, hey, now the ship image is going to refer to the blown up image instead of its original image. And that'll be the end of the game, so we won't need to use ship image again later. We'll talk about garbage collection in probably a future video, and maybe even look at some examples of that. Alright, so now we just need constructors for our variables, the ship image, the ship blown up image, the ship hitbox, and all those. So if you remember, we can actually generate those just by going to code. Let me highlight all the ones we want. Code, generate, getters and setters. And we want getters and setters for all those. Let me not put that there. Let me put that down at the bottom, just make that a little bit easier to read. So this is the check collision. Let's go ahead and put it right here. So code, generate, getters and setters, and we're going to generate our getters and setters. So this allows us to get the ship's image, set the ship image, get the blown up image, set it, etc., 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 etc. So now we probably want to stop and think for just a second, okay, are there any of those variables we actually don't want to have access outside the ship? Well, we need the ship's X and Y. We need to be able to get the ship's X and Y. But we shouldn't be able to set the ship's X and Y from outside of the ship's move method. So this move method right here, if we come back up, this should be the only way that we're able to move the ship. So we should be able to get the ship's location, get the ship X, but we probably shouldn't be able to set it from outside of the ship itself. All right. What about getting and setting the ship's width? Well, you come back up here, you probably don't need to change the, well, you might need to. I mean, there's a chance if you want to change the ship's image in the middle of the game, you're going to want to be able to access the ship's width and the ship's height from outside of the ship image. Or sorry, from outside of the ship class. So like in test game, if you have it running, your game running, and your ship gets an upgrade maybe, you would want to be able to get the ship's width and height and set the ship's width and height. So why don't we go ahead and leave those right there as they are, and I think that's pretty much it. So we should have getting the ship's image, setting the ship's image, getting its blown up image, setting its blown up image, and the X and the Y, getting the X and getting the Y. Alright, so we've gone ahead and created a brand new ship class. In our next video, what we're going to do is we're going to create an instance of that class in test game, and all of the code we need to make our game run again, so that we can then start building out the asteroid and building out the bullets, so that we can start having those classes interact. Alright, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.